Before we dive too deep in this, I'll give my overall opinion, which is I liked it. It's not a movie I particularly love. It's not a movie I particularly dislike. It's kind of right down the middle for me. There's a lot about it I like. There's a lot about it I dislike. But the stuff I dislike, I think, is going to be a lot more difficult to talk about broadly. So let's talk about the positives really quick before I get too deep into this, before I start talking about the stuff I didn't like. This is an expensive movie, and it looks like an expensive movie. And I know that sounds like faint praise, but for so many movies with $250 million budgets, like the Avengers movies, for example, sometimes they don't look that expensive. All the visual effects are pretty solid, seamless even. The costumes, the production design, the look of the movie, all feels expensive. It looks great. It sounds great. It feels good. And the music by Michael Giacchino is wonderful. The performances are all good. Everything technically, everything behind the money, I suppose, of this movie is good. It's all up to snuff.
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
This is definitely a movie that went for story first. And that's fine. If you want to have a complex story with minor characterization, you can do that. Inception does that very well, I think, even though there is some decent characterization in there. This one has a very complex story, to the point of it feeling very convoluted. There's a billion characters doing a billion different things, and sometimes they interconnect in ways that's minorly interesting. But for the most part, it is just a billion different characters doing a billion different things, and Batman loosely being connected to them. And that's my biggest issue with it, really, overall, is that Batman, as a character, Bruce Wayne, is not that interesting. And he's not that involved in the story in a way that's interesting. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. He is in almost every frame of this movie. Batman is the most involved character in the movie because it's titled The Batman, as he should be. The problem is, he doesn't feel like the one driving the story. He feels like he's just kind of observing it as it happens to him. Most of it is characters saying things out loud that are happening with Batman being in the room. I mean, there's literally a point when he plugs in a thumb drive and it says encrypted, and a character literally says, "It's encrypted." Yeah, no shit. Batman doesn't do a whole lot in terms of forwarding the story like these other characters do. You have Selina Kyle, who has probably the most interesting character of everybody in the movie. You have the Penguin. You have Falcone. You have all of these police officers. You have the Riddler. You have so many characters, and none of them are really developed in a way that's interesting beyond them just being there to push the story forward. The Falcone is there to tell Bruce Wayne things and then get captured by the cops. Selina Kyle is there to tell Bruce Wayne things and then goes off on her own before saying, "You should come with me," just like she does in The Dark Knight Rises.
Come with me. Save yourself. You don't owe these people anymore.
The story is almost literally the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. If you had just taken the Riddler character and made a movie about him and took this story and applied it to that, it's almost exactly like the Joker's origin story in Joker. He's a guy who came up from a tough upbringing. He is beat down by society, so he becomes anti-establishment, and slowly, as the pain of reality sets in, he becomes a supervillain and tries to incite a mob into toppling a government. It's like the same story. It's insane. But that's the fail here, is that it is this story that feels like an amalgamation of a bunch of other things that loosely connect to each other. And honestly, I would be more okay with this if I cared about any of these characters. Now, I said again, most of them exist just to push the plot forward, and I still think that's true. And that, again, could be okay if I liked any of them or cared about any of them. Selena Kyle is quite literally the only character I connected with at all. Bruce Wayne is not a character in this. The whole point of this 3-hour bloated pacing nightmare of a movie is that Bruce Wayne questions whether or not he should be Batman, which is literally the plot of Spider-Man 2. But in that one, it's way more clever and interesting and worked into the story in a way that actually works, because it puts Spider-Man and Peter Parker in it together.
You take Spider-Man's pictures, right?
I used to.
Where is he?
Henry and I agree. We don't see his picture in the paper anymore.
He, quit.
He has to choose whether to be Spider-Man or to have a personal life. Being Spider-Man gets in the way of him going to MJ's play, it gets in the way of his grades, it gets in the way of all these things to the point where he's completely lost his sense of identity. And that's almost literally what this is supposed to be about, but you don't even get the sense of that until the last 5 minutes when Batman has a monologue narrating over top of the movie where he says, maybe I could, be something other than Batman every once in a while. People need a symbol to look up to, and Batman, I don't know. It's insane. It feels like that's the whole point of the movie. Because Riddler's whole plot is to topple this government with the help of Batman, unwitting help. He's sending all the stuff to Batman, and Batman is trying to piece it all together. He's the detective, which is interesting, and I liked that he was an actual detective in this, doing detective-y things. But the plot falls into his lap more often than it doesn't, because that's what Riddler's plan is, to just give Batman the plot to the movie. As Batman, or Bruce Wayne, finds out that he's a pawn in this plan by the Riddler to topple the establishment, he seems to question whether or not he should be Batman, which at least that should be what it's going for, I think. But he never has that moment of self-reflection. There's not that moment where he's like, oh, I caused all of this. I'm the one that actually did all of this. Riddler just kind of sent me things. He killed a couple people, sure, but I'm the one that put everything into motion. There's never a moment like that where he reflects in an introspective way and then deals with that. It is just, oh, I'm a pawn in this. Oh, I'm a pawn in this. And the movie's over.
I've been trying to reach you. Find the gun! This is about a king, and Riddler's the match.
You need moments when he actually has conversations either with himself or someone close to him, like Alfred, about that. Hey, Alfred, so I just found out that the Riddler was manipulating me this whole time, and I don't know if it's right for me to be Batman, actually, because I just caused all of this death and destruction inadvertently because I was the one that was solving it all. Oh, Master Wayne, yeah, that's a heavy burden to bear, but someone has to bear it. Someone has to be that symbol. Someone has to do the right thing, whether it's hard. You have to have a moment like that. Something like that. And this movie just does not have it.
Even though sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Even our dreams.
So the arc of Bruce Wayne questioning whether he's should be Batman or not, which is his ending monologue and kind of his beginning monologue, is completely mute because it's barely an arc. It's barely a factor in the movie. There's a part when he finds out that his dad got a reporter killed for having dirt on his family, and he questions whether he should be fighting anymore as Batman because he fought for his father's name. And then he finds out that, oh, actually, he got the reporter killed because he had dirt on his mom. And then he's just fine with it. All of a sudden, it doesn't change the fact that his dad still murdered someone. I mean, you can question one thing, but not the other. It's incredibly weird. So ultimately, that's the Batman for me. It's a convoluted, slightly messy movie with too many characters that aren't interesting and too big of a plot that also manages not to be interesting. It's overly long in a lot of ways. The first act struggles to actually set up stakes for the movie. It takes like an hour to find out what even the main story is. For almost an hour, I was like, why do I care about anything that's happening? A third of the movie, and I didn't even know what I was supposed to be caring for at all. It was so bizarre. And then the second act is pretty great. I like the second act. There's some great action set pieces in there. The action overall, I think, is great. And then the third act stumbles into melodrama in a way that did not work for me. If I cared about this plot, if I cared about any of these characters, I think this melodrama stuff would actually just be drama and work. But since I didn't, it just came across goofy. Like when he cuts this power line and falls into the water below, which is this big heroic moment where he's supposed to be kind of sacrificing himself. This swelling music comes in, the sound cuts out, and he falls in slow motion into the water. And I was like, okay, so he's gonna like fall in and people are gonna help him out, you know, get him out of there. But no, 5 seconds later, he just pops out on his own and is fine. So why did you do it like that? There's a lot of questions I have with this movie. And not all of them are good, but there is enough here that works to say a light recommendation. A light recommendation, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. It's a fine movie. A lot of people are going to really like it, but for me, 3 hours is way too long for a movie that feels like it's borrowing from a lot of different places and not doing it as well as any of them. And especially because none of these characters work, except for maybe Selena Kyle and the slapdash hackney am I supposed to be Batman plot or arc that comes in right at the end. I don't know. If you already know if you like it. You've already seen it. Whatever.